I have done several videos over the past few years where I use the Bible to back up the thesis of them. One was proof there are no real Christians, and more recently, how to prove that God is real. I got lots of responses from Christians, a bunch of pissed off Christians. Many were totally unaware the verses I used were even in the Bible. Many used the out of context dodge for verses they found uncomfortable, but when challenged, not a single one ever showed how the context changed the verse. Some claim the verses were only meant for who Jesus was talking to at the time, but even those apologies fall flat. Next came the claim that we are not supposed to tempt God, using Mark 4:12. Let's take a look. Now let's take a look at the context of Mark 4:12. It seems these Christians are taking the verse out of context. Satan was tempting Jesus with the kingdoms of the earth. So their claims that taking Jesus up on his promises is somehow tempting him is bogus. Some very humble Christians boasted that I didn't know the Bible as well as them, and so I did not understand it like they do. Informing them that I'm a seminary graduate and a former believer of 40 years, these folks soon took the powder. With their boilerplate apologies in tatters, next came claims that I was mocking God. I have learned over the past 6 years on YouTube that Christians hate the words of Jesus. He never means what he clearly is reported to have said. They never seem to question the words of Paul. Some were so silly as to tell me that I did not understand because I lacked the discernment of the Holy Spirit. I recently did a video on that subject, and to date, not a single Christian has dared to try a refutation. They can't, because in the real world their Holy Spirit is AWOL. The last refuge of Paulians is to claim the promises of Jesus are just metaphors. It just happens that if the words of Jesus are clearly false in the real world, they are metaphors. Let's look at a few of these verses. Matthew 7:7. Jesus says, "Ask and you will get, no ifs, ands, or buts." This is false, as nothing fails like prayer. Research has shown over and over petitionary prayer does not work. So this verse is a metaphor. Right, Christians? What did Jesus really mean? This is Matthew 17:20. Jesus tells his followers, if they have just a tiny bit of faith, nothing shall be impossible for them to do. Since 15 million children die each year from starvation and disease, and children's hospitals are full up, this verse is false in the real world. This verse also a metaphor, Christians? What did Jesus really mean? Mark 11, verses 23 and 24. Jesus tells his followers they will be able to move mountains. Whatever they say will come to pass, and every desire will be fulfilled. It's a large portion of today's Christians live in the third world countries in dire poverty. This verse is false in the real world. Or is it just a metaphor, Christians? If so, what did Jesus really mean? Let's do one more. John 14, verses 12 and 13. Jesus says that folks who believe in him will be able to do the same stuff he does. Raise the dead, walk on water. He also says he will answer yes to every prayer asked in his name. Again, in the real world, these verses are evidently false, since not a single Christian of the 2 billion can do anything close to what Jesus is reported to have done. Are these verses metaphors, Christians? What did Jesus really mean? If these verses are metaphors, let's look at the very same chapter of John, verses 2 and 3. Jesus says he's going to create mansions in heaven for his followers to live in the afterlife. If verses 12 and 13 are metaphors, then verses 2 and 3 are also. Right, Christians? If not, why not?